A message from our sponsor, Riverview Boat Store and Tug Service. Riverview Boat Store and Tug Service has been your trusted marine supplier servicing the upper Mississippi River for over 25 years. Since 1998, they have grown to be one of the largest inland boat stores. They are not just a delivery service. They have what you need in stock and ready to order. Their office and warehouse are centrally located in Bellevue, Iowa, and with their fleet of specially built delivery boats and refrigerated vehicles, Riverview can conveniently deliver groceries anywhere on the Upper Miss or the Illinois. Their green and white tugs can be found up and down the Mississippi, and they operate one of the largest lock assist businesses on the Upper Miss with 12 tugs servicing tows from Hastings, Minnesota to Clinton, Iowa. Their website now includes online grocery ordering with monthly specials available for review or download, and their fleet equipment information and vessel telephone numbers can also be found there. Like them on Facebook at Riverview Boat Store and Tug Service, and check out their website at www.riverviewboatstore.com. Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Mr. Henry Hill, former captain in the industry. He spent 16 years on the water, and since 1989 has been driving trucks to and fro. I met this gentleman on Facebook. He is an admin of the Rivermen and Riverboats Facebook page, one of the 6 that I upload to. This has taken a while. He is an over-the-road truck driver, so tracking him down has been a bit of a challenge. But Mr. Henry Hill, thank you finally for joining me.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Where do we find you today? Where are you right now?
I'm in Bloomington, Illinois, actually kind of close to Pekin, Illinois, right off the Illinois River.
And are you headed to Wisconsin or from Wisconsin?
No, sir, I am heading to Richmond, Virginia.
Didn't you load in Wisconsin?
Yes, sir, I did load in Wisconsin, Mosinee, Wisconsin.
Gotcha. Well, first things first, where do all these pictures come from that you're posting almost every day?
Well, I went to a lot of libraries when I was younger, and I got quite a few pictures off of them. Took my phone in, snap pictures, stuff like that. Got some, borrowed some off of Dick's Towboat Gallery, but mostly just different library sites and stuff like that. I had quite a few, I'm going to say almost upwards of 600 photos I took myself of me being at the wheel, on deck, or whatever, of boats that I was around at the time back in the 70s and the 80s. But we had a house fire about 5, 6 years ago, and I lost quite a bit of stuff with it. Unfortunately, memories like that you can't replace.
You do seem to know a fair amount about all these boats you're posting about. Was all that knowledge just from over the years on the river?
Well, both actually, honestly, because there's a lot of them, as you notice, a lot of the pictures was before my time. So a lot of that stuff is like what I've learned, through libraries and reading and stuff. But there are a lot of those boats that I actually seen when I was out there on the water. I mean, there's a lot of guys just like in this profession here that they go down the canal or they go down the highway and not even pay attention to the other side of the road. I was one of them guys who was always curious of what was coming at me. Like I'd see a boat and I'd kind of put it in my mental, you know, memory of like, wow, this is a really cool boat or whatever. And I got a memory that's kind of like a photographic memory, if you want to say. And it's like I can see a boat now from 40 years ago and say, oh man, that used to be so and so or whatever, just by looking at it. Whereas a lot of, like I said, a lot of guys now are like, oh man, it's just another boat or it's another truck, not even pay attention. And then later on down the line, somebody will say, hey man, you ever seen so and so boat? You ever seen the Joey Showtown or anything? They'll be like, I've heard the name, but I don't think I've ever seen that one. I grew up Channelview, Texas, and born and raised in Houston. I lived there almost all my life. And I grew up on a Sandy Center River in a little area called Banana Bend. And they used to have a company called Parker Brothers out of Houston They had a shipyard and they had sand and gravel business. And they had, I don't know, probably about 10, 12 boats, mostly smaller boats. And they run around. Well, anyways, we lived on the river and it was like, I don't know, 400 foot from my house down to the riverbank. And those boats used to pass and they would tie up next to our property. Up next to our property was called a right of way. It's like a clearing where the High Line towers go across. And they had like a couple wooden pylons out there. So those boats would bring up two barges. They couldn't take both barges up to the pit at the same time, so they had to trip them one at a time. Those boats used to come up there called the Zip 2 all the time. And I'd go over there and I'd start talking to the deckhands and stuff while they're tying the barges off. And, just getting real friendly and all, getting to know everybody. And one day, old boy come out there and he says, "Hey, want to take a ride with us up there to Banana Bend up there to the pit? We're going to go drop the spars off. You can ride up there and ride back with us. It won't take that long." I didn't even go ask my mom or dad. I just jumped on the barge and took off. And ever since then, I fell in love with boats, man.
How old were you at that point?
10 years old.
Yeah.
And we moved away from there because it started flooding real bad. And my dad decided we're going to move. He always loved the water. My dad never worked on boats. He was always truck driver, but he always loved the water since he was young. So he wanted to move to the water again, but to a higher place where it doesn't flood. So we moved down, I don't know, about 10, 15 miles away over to Channelview, down there off of Market Street. And we moved over there and we lived there for probably, I don't know, about 10, 15 years. But back then, it was mostly houses, whereas right now it's nothing but towboat fleets and barge fleets all through there. It's called the Old River. Well, my dad would make me laugh. He'd always say, "Man, you're never going to see any towboats down here, son." And I'm like, "Okay." And it was rare. Every once in a blue moon, you'd get somebody cut through there. But, like maybe because the San Jack River down by the ferry was closed and that was the back way out. It'd be like I said, every once in a blue moon, you get a boat go through there. But there was an old boy that lived about 3 miles down the street from us. His name was Merle Griswold, and he owned a company called Interbay Towing. He had a couple boats. He had the White Castle, the Poly L, and the OU 311. Well, I used to go down there, ride my 10-speed bike down there and go, talk to him and stuff like that. He'd let me go on the boat and eat dinner and stuff like that. And he says, "Man, when you get 14 years old and you get a miner's release, mom and dad let you get a miner's release, I'll put you to work." I was like, I thought he was joking with me at first. But so I talked my dad into it, uh, went down and got the miner's release and started decking in 1974 at a whopping $25 a day. And believe it or not, my dad, I quit school in the 8th grade. My dad was like, "Man, you're not going to amount to nothing. You're going to work at fast food the rest of your life, or you're going to dig ditches or be a garbage man or something." And I started that decking job, and I was making about half of what he was making a day. So I stayed with that old boy there for a couple of years, and I went to work for a company called Western Towing right down the street from that, which is now Kirby the Rock. Kirby's got the fleet down there. They took over Western Towing. I worked on a boat down there called the Coat, and worked with a good captain, super good captain. He's passed away years ago, Cliff Dowhouse, and he taught me a lot of stuff, how to steer a boat and everything like that. And I stayed over there for a little while, and I got the fever to go on a canal. I never was really one of these guys that was real nuts. I'd get the waterway journals and stuff like that and see, the big boats like the Viking Queen and stuff like that. I never really cared. To me, back then I was kind of a lazy kid, to be honest with you. and I was used to one or two barges all the time, man, the gravy train. And I'd look at the Waterways Journal and see these big boats with like 30, 40 barges. I was like, man, that's too much work there. So I kind of steered away from that. Never got interested in that. Now I regret it. Now I wish I would have. But so I went to work on a canal, and my first canal companies I worked for were out of Louisiana, down on Bayou Lafourche, down out of Cutoff and Galliano. Worked with some real good people down there. And then after that, I went offshore for a couple of years for Noti J. Terrio out of Golden Meadows. And I worked on a big offshore tug, Elise Caterio, 7,200 horsepower. And she went to the North Sea for a while, and I tried that. And it wasn't much fun, let me tell you, 40, 50-foot seas sometimes. So we got back over to Louisiana again. She tied up. I got off of there and went back to inland again.
Tell me some more about the North Sea before you get too far past that.
Well, we was working off of Scotland quite a bit. And man, it was just, a normal day out there, what they call a calm day, was 5 to 10 foot seas. And which most of the time the North Sea is like that, to be honest with you. But when it does have its storms, it's not like the Gulf of Mexico where you got 10, 20 foot seas. You get 40 to 50 footers out there. I mean, it's well documented, man. I mean, it's terrible out there, man. It took me a while to get used to it. I remember the very first time I went offshore, I didn't get nauseated feeling from the seas or anything. I got nauseated because we left the sea buoy, and it was one of these nights. I don't know if you've ever seen a night like this, but when you go out into open water, the water looks dark black almost, and then the sky is black. It's got clouds covered and no stars or no moon or nothing. And it looks like it's a weird feeling. I feel like you're going out into a void, into, a big open empty space. That's how best I can describe it. And it was pretty crazy, man, that first night out. I felt a little nauseated then, but after that, I was fine. The next morning, when it was daylight, I was good. And it took us, man, what was it? I'm wanting to say a good 14 days, maybe a little bit longer, to get over to the North Sea from Louisiana. That was a heck of a little ride there now. But
And how old were you at that point?
that point, I was, let's see, 22. And
So that was year 8 in the industry, correct?
what's that?
That was year number 8 in the industry.
Yes.
Well,
And
before we go too far down that road, as you mentioned, your father was a truck driver. I believe we talked offline. Your grandfather too. Uh,
yes,
where did they run? How long were they out there on the road?
my grandfather first started out with Mrs. Bear's Bread, and he was a company driver for a long time. Then he bought a couple of end dumps, hauling sand and gravel, and that's how my dad got started. Grandfather taught my dad. My dad never was a company driver. He started out, my grandfather gave him a truck. He started out as an owner operator. And my dad passed away back in the mid 2000s. Well, anyways, he finished up at Mayflower Electronic Exhibits. He had one of these big, fancy, large car Peterbilts with like the 180-inch sleeper on it. And he did all the electronic exhibits like over on the East Coast, like New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, stuff like that. He drove for a long time. He started in the 50s. Um, I remember my grandfather used to have some old auto cars and some old Macs, and I remember them being rough riding, man. I mean, there wasn't no air suspension like there is now. These trucks now, you're spoiled with them.
You said you're 14, getting on a boat for the first time with a miner's release.
Yes.
Tell me about that experience. I know you said you've been on a boat before, but as far
Yeah.
as working, onboarding, safety, all that kind of stuff. How was it back then?
It was pretty neat, man. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I was real super excited to do it because, like I said, I never did nothing more than ride or go down and have dinner on the boat, and that was about it. My first boat was a White Castle. She was built like in 1947 by Nashville Bridge. She had some twins out there. She had the Iowa, the Bull Calf, and the uh, Gibson, and the Crochet 3. She had like about four or five sisters, and she was a single engine, um, 600 horsepower. She had an Enterprise engine in it, which I don't think they've made Enterprise engines in 30, 40 years, to be honest with you. But she was a pretty quiet boat, man. She was a comfortable old boat. It was crazy though, but it's like all the floors inside of her, I'll never forget. Most boats you ride got tile floor or something in it. I've rode one boat that had a cultured marble floor in it. But she had steel floors in it that we had to paint, all the time because you walk across the painted floor just like the deck, it's going to wear down. And she had steel floors all through it. Had one head with a screen door on it, no air conditioner, no heater in that son of a gun. And you'd have to go in there like in the summertime. At night, you'd take a shower, and like I said, there was no AC or nothing like that. Didn't even have a oscillating fan in there. But anyways, and then you had to use a 5-gallon bucket to flush the toilet. And other than that, though, I mean, she's a heck of a boat. From what I understand, she got scrapped about 10, 15 years ago. I think somebody told me. But it's a shame, man. Some of these old boats, you know, there's not any more like them around, and they just scrap them, man. Instead of trying to at least save one of each style, you know what I mean, and keep it as as nothing else, make a museum out of it or whatever. Like some of those steamboats they did, like the Verity and the W.P. Snyder. I mean, there's some really neat old towboats that got scrapped over the years, man. That it's a shame because they were one of a kind. Just like I worked at Houston Barge Lines back in the mid-'80s before I went to the wheelhouse, got licensed. And I rode the Captain Briscoe for a while. I always wanted to go ride the Brimstone. That was my favorite of the fleet. I never got to ride her. But that boat right there, they're fixing to scrap her, and she is one of a kind. She was the biggest conventional towboat the Parker brothers built. The other boat that they built was a little bit bigger than her, but was the Captain Briscoe, which is now the Wisconsin for Marquette Transportation. She's a retractable. She's not a conventional. But those two boats right there were the biggest boats they had at the time. And like I said, Parker Brothers was about, I don't know, 10, 15 miles to the west of where I lived when I lived in Channelview. They were over off of Greens Bayou. And they built some pretty cool boats, man, I'll tell you. They, like I said, they were not only a shipyard, they also had a sand and gravel division. I did that for a while, and then I finally broke loose in the pilot house, and I was working for Alamo Barge Lines, which was a pretty decent sized company at the time. And I loved it over there, man. I had some good times over there, and that's where I broke in at the wheelhouse.
Any good stories about your transition to the wheelhouse?
Well, I was always excited to do it for one thing. I mean, for one thing, it was a little bit better money. And like I said, I was still in that little phase. I mean, I wasn't lazy, but I just didn't, I wasn't into extremely hard work either. So it was that transition of being able to get off the deck, not work hard and get in the pilot house and make a little bit more money. The prestige of being a wheelman, back then it was a big thing, it was a big to do. Like now everybody transitions into the pilot house and it doesn't hold the glory like it used to. I mean, it's just a natural thing now, whereas back then You pretty much had to earn it. Now they got these guys coming out, man. They'll ride the boat for a year or two, and next thing you know, they're already relief captain or captain, man. Back then, you'd ride a boat 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, and you had to earn it, man. I mean, you had to like one of my best interviews that I've seen that you've had so far is a gentleman that I'd really like to meet, and he explains it just how it was, and that's Captain Jimbo J. Rod. That gentleman right there, and Captain Larry Barnes with Barnes Marine. Those two guys right there can tell you some stuff now, and you can take it for gospel, man. I mean, they've been there, done that, and everything that they say is right to the T. I mean, we all worked on boats about the same time. Larry, Captain Jimbo, and I. It's just I was never, like I said, into the big boats. I rode the Captain Briscoe was the biggest boat I ever rode, and I didn't ride it for a long time. I rode it for like 3 or 4 hitches. And then they took me off of that and they put me on a Margie D, which was a small 800 horsepower boat that shoved one sulfur barge. We ran from Brady's Island in Houston out to Trinity, up the Trinity River up there to the sulfur dock up there by Dayton, Liberty. And then I left over there and that's when I went to work for Alamo. And then Alamo eventually became Hollywood Marine took over Alamo. And then later on, I guess after that, after I got off of boats, I think 89 or 90 maybe, that's when Kirby came in. So
Well, so that got you off of boats. I know you said there were some family complications that brought you
yeah, yes,
back shoreside.
yeah, real bad family issues got me off. And when I did that, I actually got like real comfortable with, not being gone. Um, I kind of understand where a lot of people come. Like, I have a lot of friends that are captains now, and it's just like in this business, man. The glory, the new wears off quick, and it's like I've always had like a short attention span on things. I get tired of them fast. Um, it's like, man, I got so used to being home. My dad taught me how to drive truck. I was running pretty much local stuff like that. I'd be home a lot. When you do that after a while, you get used to it, and it's like, man, I don't need to go back out on a boat. And honestly, the 90s and almost to like the middle 2000s, I didn't even see towboats, man. I didn't even hardly even go around them. I mean, it was rare, because most of the truck driving companies I worked for, we just ran around Houston and out like to San Antonio or up to Dallas. And then when I started doing long haul, I started doing nothing but Houston to California every week back and forth. So I was never even seeing towboats, man. I mean, it just, they just left me. And all of a sudden, about 2005, I guess it was, 2006, I started for some reason getting a fever again. I tried to get back on boats, I couldn't. And then finally, 2012, I ran into an old boy, Captain Keith St. Pierre. And I used to work with him on a Mr. Warner for St. Pierre Marine down in Galliano, Louisiana. Well, anyways, we he contacted me and says, "Hey, man, I heard you wanted to go back to work on boats, man." I was like, "Yeah, kind of. I know I had to start all over and stuff like that, And it was like, "Well, don't you still have your license?" I was like, "Nah, man." So he says, "Well, you're gonna have to start over and get a couple years on the deck, and then maybe you can get your license back, get some letters written to you and stuff like that." And so he got me on with a company called Genesis Marine, a pretty good company. And I rode with him for a little bit, and then I rode mostly on the Red River Express, a boat that ran from Baton Rouge, New Orleans. We ran like from Magellan, Marrero, up to Davis Oil up in Shreveport, Louisiana, up the Red River. And that was a pretty neat deal there.
What do you remember about that? What made it so neat?
It's just that it was a really cool river for one thing. I mean, different because I mean it's a little bit different than Mississippi River. I've never really honestly ran the Missouri. I ran the Ohio a little bit up to like Mount Vernon. Never past that. Um, it's hard to explain. I mean, it can be a swift river now. Let me tell you, that's something a gun can run. But it's just I believe it was only 4 or 5 locks. I can't remember 100% sure. It's so funny. It's like I could tell you what happened 35 years ago, but try to tell you something that happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, I kind of get a little mental block on it. But I think it was 4 or 5 locks you went through, and then, like I said, we went up to Davis Oil, which is just below Shreveport, right outside Shreveport, and there's a steel dock right below Davis Oil. You see them Terrell boats up there all the time, but it was just like I said, it was smooth because of locking. You know, you could go into the locks, and it didn't take very long to lock through most of the time. And the only pain in the butt thing about it is you'd get into the season where you had those lily pads that would get real thick and real bad in certain areas, and you'd have to raise the sounder up about once an hour to clean the lily pads off the foot and on the sounder. And then we had this little section. You come out of the old river down there at the bottom. There's a Terrell fleet down there. You come out of there's a little section, kind of make like a left turn and go up. And this area called the Gauntlet. It's a bunch of little underwater dikes and stuff in there. And we broke a couple face wires going up through there, hitting the dikes. And but it was a pretty sweet deal. I mean, we had two 30,000 barrel heated oil barges that we pushed. I tell you what, man, towboat, when I went back to it in 2012, man, it changed like 100%. I got on the boat and I looked at them face wires. Well, it used to be face wires, steel wires, and they were that I call them Velcro rope. I don't know what it's called, what the real name is. 'Cause I've heard it called so many different names, but I seen those. I was like, what in the world? And Keith was explaining to me, he's like, man, there was a lot of injuries because of those heavy, steel face wires. So they started going to those. And I'll never forget my first day on the boat, man. After not being on the boat for 30 years, man, we were at Brady's Island up there at Bloodworth Shipyard up there. And it's now called Southwest Shipyard. But anyways, um, the boat was getting some work done to it, so we had to go out on like a little shakedown cruise and let them check the engines and stuff like that. So we came back and we had to tie up alongside an empty barge. And I'm not bragging or nothing, man. I mean, probably thousands of guys do this because I see videos, guys know how to throw lines. But after 30 years, man, we went alongside the barge, and I caught a quarter line from the front quarter bit up to the empty, caught a cavil, and on the first try. Keith's like, man, you still a cowboy. So I mean, and it was like I said, I thought it was pretty neat after all them years, not throwing a line or not even seeing one, to actually do it. I was really starting to like it over there, and things started getting bad though, man. It just, there's tying a lot of boats up all over. Things started getting real slow. Um, Over at Genesis, man, we were running skeleton crews quite a bit. Um, I remember one time it was just me and a tankerman, and we had 3 barges, and we were unloaded. We unloaded down there at Shell Norco, well known dock. Anybody that's been riding towboats knows about Shell Norco quite a bit, that dock down there. But anyways, long story short, it was just me and the old boy on there, tankerman. And he'd been up for a couple of days. It was him and a shore tankerman that was discharging 3 barges. He was having a pretty rough time. He was pretty worn out. So we got orders to swap tow with another boat. Another boat was coming up, bringing us 3 more, and we were giving our 3 to them. So, I was on the pilot's watch. I was on call watch, 12 and 12. And the pilot says, well, we got this old boy coming up, bringing us 3 barges. You better go wait. wake the old boy up, man, get him up out of bed, let him get a cup of coffee before we swap out toes. I was like, you know what? I'm going to handle this myself. So the old boy brought us 3 barges up, and each barge has like 5 soft lines on it for dock lines. I stripped 15 soft lines off, 2 5-gallon buckets, tools, the running lights, pike pole. What was it? Man, it was like 6 or 8 fire extinguishers. And I brought all that stuff back to the boat and let him sleep. I handled everything. But I'm going to tell you what, I ain't going to lie to you. I was worn out. I probably ain't been that worn out since I was a teenager, man. I mean, 52 years old doing that stuff like that. It was pretty rough.
What's one of the prettiest or most surprising places you've been on a towboat?
Man, when I started, I was riding on a model bow tug, a little 65-foot long tug, and we pushed 1 barge from Tentacle, Chalmette to St. Mark's, Florida, Tentacle, St. Mark's, and running that east side through the Mississippi Sounds down through Florida and out that way is beautiful, man. I mean, most of the time the water is blue green, kind of like on the west end out there by Padre Island, Corpus Christi. But it is so nice running down there, and there's not a whole lot of towboat traffic out there. Now the sounds can get a little bit congested every once in a while and rough, but like I said, I was on a little tug. It had a towing winch on the back. She was rigged up to where she could go offshore too. And this was 1981, late 80, early 81 when I rode her, and tug called the Eric Paul for St. Pierre and Sons Marine. And Eric, the tug's namesake, I rode as his mate. And back then, it was I don't know if other boats from like Mississippi, Alabama, or Texas did it. I know mostly it was Louisiana boats rode what was called an unlicensed pilot. It's like I was making $90 a day, but I didn't have a license. And I did that for a while. But like I said, on that boat was a real nice little boat. Eric taught me a lot. Would go through the sounds, and if it got too rough, the towboats would hold up and stuff. And like I said, our boat was inland and offshore tug. I mean, you could go offshore with it real easy. And I said, it had a towing winch on the back. The water would get too rough, we'd just put the thing on the hawser, put it on the towing winch, and tow her on across. Them old model bow boats, man, they ride pretty good, and waves, whereas a flat bottom boat will beat you to death. Inside, actually, honestly, and I bet you can talk to any towboater and they'll tell you the same thing. From from the Rigolettes over, it's some beautiful, beautiful running area over there, man. I really liked it, man. I remember one morning I woke up, first run we made down there, and it was kind of foggy out. And Eric was up there in the pilot house with me, and he's like, look over there to the right. I couldn't see much fog. And the next thing, the fog started clearing up a little bit, and we were going by Pensacola Navy Base, and there was a big, huge aircraft carrier right there. And that's the first time I'd ever seen an aircraft carrier in real life. And it was massive. It looked so cool, man. And we did that run for quite a while down that way. That was a sweet run. Like I said, 1 barge, Tentacle Chalmette to Tentacle St. Mark's.
Tell me about the prettiest or most surprising place you've been on the road.
Oh man, there's so many of them. To be honest with you, I mean, I've been in every state in the United States and quite a bit of the provinces of Canada. I've never been to Alaska. I've been all up and down the East Coast of Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia. I've been to Newfoundland where you have to ride the ferry across. They put trucks on there all the time and you ride across the Newfoundland island out there. I'm going to honestly say, and this is going to sound funny, man, the most beautiful part to me is along that Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. I mean, it is just I take pictures of it, do videos, whatever. It's just, it doesn't do it justice, man. You have to see it with your own eyes. I mean, it is some gorgeous, beautiful country through there, man. And it can get wicked too. I mean, you wouldn't think it, but that river right there can get 70 to 80 to 100-mile-an-hour winds through that Columbia Gorge. And those towboats up there, man, they're tough, buddy. Let me tell you, there will be 4 to 5 foot whitecaps out there on that water sometimes, 70, 80-mile-an-hour winds. And those old boys right there, man, they're still moving, man. They ain't pushed into the bank waiting on wind or weather. They're rolling, man. They're moving. And, but it's not by choice naturally, because the thing that's different between that river and say the Mississippi, the Missouri, or the Ohio, which are all basically, mud bottom, sand bottom, whatever, sediment. The Columbia River is mostly the bottom is lined with rocks. So you really can't do much stopping. I mean, there ain't no pushing into the bank over there unless you want to tear a hole in the bottom of the barge. I mean, them old boys up there, it's a whole different ball game, man.
Well, tell me about life on the road.
Actually pretty boring. I mean, I look forward to going around the water and stuff like that. It's really actually boring. Like I said, I've been doing it for so long. It's just basically a paycheck now. But I've been with this company for 7 years, and the reason why I stay with them is because I can do stuff like I can get off the beaten path, and I can go down to lock number 7. I could go to lock 12, lock 13, just whatever, man. I can go down to a chain of rocks, drive up on the levee, catch boats over there, and my company don't say nothing. As long as I do the job, get the load delivered, everything's cool, man. I mean, and the thing about it is like when I go to Houston, my hometown, I deliver a lot over on the east side out by Baytown and LaPorte. And most truck drivers, they go to the truck stop. Well, I really don't like going to truck stops. For one thing, I've been hit 3 times in the truck stop. And, it's not fun riding around with a pretty truck that's all busted up because somebody backed into you or hit you. So I'll go, like when I go to the Houston area, I got a refrigerator, I got microwave, everything in here that I need, man. I stock up, stop at Walmart, get my food and my drinks, and I'll go hang out down there by the Lynchburg Ferry. There's a place you can park like about 3 or 4 trucks down there, and it's real peaceful and quiet, and all the boats pass there. You got boats coming out of San Jack River. You got Houston Ship Channel, T's right there. So I catch a lot of traffic right there, and that's what I like to do, man. I mean, I'm one of these type of guys that I don't need a truck stop except to shower and fuel. Other than that, man, you'll catch me. You look off the side of the road and there'll be like a wide dirt spot, and I'll be parked out there, and that's where I'm sleeping at, man. I don't like sleeping in congested areas, man. As funny as it might sound, it unless it's real hot or real cold, I'm not gonna run my auxiliary power unit for my heat and my air conditioning. I'm gonna like last couple of nights, like in Wisconsin, I opened my windows. I got windows on the side, sleeping with screens on them, and I let a good breeze come through there. I mean, it gets down to like 52, 48, 52 degrees, and sweet sleeping. I don't like to hear any kind of noise. You get in the truck stop nowadays, and they got all these other new breed of drivers, man. They come in, and they don't care about wear and tear, or if they burn up fuel, they're not paying for it, man. So it's like they come in, park next to you, rev their truck all the way up to like 1,500 RPMs, man. I mean, you're screaming, man, and you're over there. You got everything shut off, got your windows open, trying to enjoy the peace and quiet. And these guys just don't care, man. So that's why I like to go find a place where it's just me, and I can just relax, man, and sleep good. But the funny thing about that too is like I can't stand noise like out here like this. But when I was working back on the towboats and I'd go home, I couldn't sleep because there wasn't the noise of the engines running. And of course, most of the time, the only time you shut the engine down on a towboat is if you're in dry dock or if you're at the dock or in the fleet, I mean, the rest of the time when you're running, you get used to all kind of noises. Like we used to run down a canal, shut one engine down, at a time, and check the oil and stuff, and then crank the engine up and shut the other one down. You do that, every watch. So I mean, you just get so used to that kind of noise and the vibration and everything, and it's a whole different world. But it almost runs pretty much parallel because out here, as on towboats, you got log books. Out here, you got mile markers. I mean, we both take diesel. We both got a fuel. So I mean, there's quite a few similarities in it.
Do any other stories come to mind from your career on towboats? Anything interesting that you'll just never forget?
Well, I'll never forget the first time I ran a canal to the river. I was always, when I was young, man, I hate to admit it, and it's a fault of mine, but back then I was super, super gullible. And just believe just about anything anybody said. Like I said, I hate to admit it, but I like to be truthful. And I remember the first time I rode a canal boat and we were heading for the river. I heard all kind of stories about boats coming out of the Port Allen route, trying to turn north into the river, and the current being real bad, and the boat, you know, falling down below the lock and getting hung up in ship anchor chains and capsizing and drowning the whole crew. So the first time, man, I went out of Port Allen locks out on the river. I stayed out on the barges till we got headed upstream pretty good. And then I went back to the boat. But then after that, man, it just, it's just like, man, it was nothing. A lot of guys I can see, honestly, I always loved the canal. A lot of guys don't love the canal, they love the river. But to me, it was the opposite. I never really cared for the river that much, man. Um, I always liked the canal, man. I like going from Brownsville to Florida back and forth, man. And Louisiana is my favorite state, man, in the country. And I just love being in Louisiana. I lived down on Bayou Lafourche in the late '70s, early '80s for a little bit, and I love and miss it down there, man. Like I said, it just Louisiana's got a lot of cool little areas to go through, like home of Twin Bridges and Bayou Buff over in Morgan City, and then you got Bayou Sorrel locks up the Port Allen route. It's got a lot of cool stuff. The only thing I really didn't get to run that much, which I wish I could have, was the Chaffalaya River. I only ran it once up to Krotz Springs, but that river's pretty neat too. There's like I said, there's a lot going on over there to me. I really enjoyed my time over there.
From some previous guests, I've heard how it was coming out of Algiers lock into the river for the first time. Tell me what that experience was. I know you said you were avoiding drowning out on the barges, but coming out of the canal, coming out of the Port Allen lock, tell me about that experience.
It's just like I said, sometimes the water can get to running right there, man. And but tell you that, I mean, it's the river. I mean, the rivers, it gets times where I'm gonna say pretty much most of the time it's not hot, but it's running all the time. And it just like I said, you come out of the locks and the boat starts sliding on you sideways a little bit, because back then I rode a lot of boats that these guys now be going to the pilot house would never think doing stuff like we used to do. We used to run an 800 horsepower boat and would shove, 1,080 foot of tow, whatever out there, man. That's unheard of nowadays. I mean, everybody's got to have at least a 2,600 or whatever to do that. I mean, it's just, we did some crazy stuff. We used to push 12 barges out of Weeks Island salt mines over there into Bayou Buff. I mean, stuff like that, with the 800. I mean, it just, boats didn't have that much power, but you had a heck of a tow. And you get out there with that size tow, you come out in Port Allen locks and that river run a little bit, man, you're going to go sideways if we get turned up. I mean, I remember many times we have to have the Capital Fleet boats come out there and push our head around for us, assist us. So, I mean, stuff like that, when you're not really used to doing that kind of stuff, can kind of be a little bit intimidating. But I took 1,080 foot through Houma Twin Bridges with a 800. It was pretty wild.
You said you came out of weeks with 12?
Yeah, weak salt mine, 12 empty barges.
Were you 6 long or 4 long?
Now we were 6 long, 2 wide,
Hmm.
and
And
that
you
was
took
back then because not very much. Like I said you kind of bootleg some stuff. You know, you do a lot of crazy stuff, just like in trucking, man. When I I first started driving trucking, man. I don't know if it's cool to put it on the air like this or not, but we did some pretty wild stuff too.
how long did it take to get through Bayou Sorrel Lock with 12?
We didn't go through Bayou Sorrel. That was a Port Island route. We went Bayou Buff over towards Algiers. You get to Morgan City, you make a right turn instead of going straight. Straight to put you on a Port Island route, and you make a right turn, go through the Bayou Buff locks, and take you over through Houma and over to Algiers.
Right. I guess I misunderstood you because we can't even get you got to break strings, break the toes in half to get through Sorrel.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, and you can only take a couple through there. I mean, it's like I remember back in the day, I worked on a boat that shoved for the Valley Line called the Leslie Brewer. There's a company called Brewer Marine Service. They had the Leslie Brewer, the Billy Brewer, and the Vital Brewer. Well, anyways, we had a contract with Valley Lines, and we would shove 5 of those Valley Line hopper barges strung out. You could take them through Brad before they started having accidents left and right. You could take them through Brazos floodgates and Colorado locks like that, 5 long. We did it many times, but then you know later on, guys were coming through there, and back then, Union Carbide had quite a few tows running that way too, and Union Carbide barges were like 250, I think 290, something like that. They were all different sizes. They had box and they had rake pieces and stuff, but they were, bigger than what I call regulation. Regulation 195 by 35. And those guys would come through there, try doing the same thing with that. And they started hitting, bullheads and stuff like that, bull nose, man. Started hitting the gates, started tearing up the long wall, you know, then that's when they put an end to it, man. And nowadays, everybody's got a trip across there pretty much all the time. I mean, I think now you can maybe take 2 strung out across there, but like I said, back in the day, it was nothing, man. I mean, I worked on a boat, man. We used to put it on the hawser, man, going across Corpus Christi Bay, going across Laguna Madre and stuff to Brownsville, That old winter get to kicking, would have 4 empty strung out, would bust out would knock the boat out, man, and get on the hawser, man, and drag them across. And there's another river I forgot. It's in Texas. It's pretty neat, actually. It's over there on the west side, and it's called the Rio Hondo River over there. I think is what it's called. It's by Rio Hondo, Texas, and it's pretty neat. It goes up. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure on the length of it, but it's a pretty cool little river. And it's got a lot of nice houses and camps and stuff alongside of it. You got that river, you got the Colorado River, and then you got the Brazos River, and then we used to go over there to Chocolate Bayou a lot. Monsanto had a pretty good sized plant over there. We used to go to Monsanto Chocolate Bayou quite a bit. There's some neat waterways around the United States. The thing I always thought would be cool is I run Montana quite a bit. I run Montana, Wyoming is like the states I run a lot. North Dakota. I always thought it would be cool. The Yellowstone River in Montana is a long river. And I always thought it would be cool if there was some way they could connect that with, like, say, the Missouri or the Mississippi and run towboats up there. That would be real neat. Because, I mean, Montana is a gorgeous country, too. And that Yellowstone River is pretty wide in some spots. I mean, you could get some boats through there. Just they'd have to do a lot of dredging. Now, that's the only bad thing. I think that river's like 4 foot deep, deepest spot. Pretty shallow river. but it's a long river. I think that thing is like 500-600 miles long, and it's a beautiful river. But like I said, it just we got beautiful waterways all around the country, man. My dream was always to go over to Europe and go ride a towboat over on. That's why I post a lot on the group of the boats that run the Rhine and over in France and stuff, the Seine and stuff like that. I think that that would really be cool to go over there and work. Everybody's talking about going down to South America, Paraguay. Nah, man, I've already done that. You know, you go towboat in Louisiana, Mississippi, it's like that. I mean, it's basically the same thing if you ask me. And the thing, like I said, it'd be cool is the Rhine River, the Seine River, all them rivers over there in Germany and Hungary and stuff like that. They have some real cool looking stuff going on over there, man. And they seem to stay pretty busy too. I don't know if you've ever seen any of my pictures I post, but I have some pretty cool looking vessels, and their stuff is not real far off from ours. Uh, they got face wires. They wire the tow together. Most of them have big wheel winches. I don't know if they use ratchets or not, but and the only thing that I've never seen about them is I've never seen pictures of them at night, so I don't know if they use the same kind of running light configuration. I'm sure they use the starboard and port, lights on the pilot house are the same as ours, but on the tow, I'm not sure if it's the same thing, with the flashing yellow light in the center. So I've always wanted to see it, but I haven't never seen any night pictures.
I'll have to go dig around and find some of those pictures you're talking about.
Yeah. Now I can tell you for a fact, the Columbia River, it's 100% identical as far as navigation lights to, Mississippi River, Missouri, Ohio, whatever, man. Their lights are the same thing. They got the red, green, and the flashing yellow, but they don't use swing lights. That's the only difference, Uh, towboats down south or on the river, use the old peak light, and the ones on the Columbia don't. And a lot of them up there, they like to use those wind socks instead of wind flags. That's another difference. So up there is all the locks up there. You can go into all them locks with a 4-pack like they do, and not even have to knock the boat out, man. I mean, their locks are so simple, man, so easy to make. It's not like ours where you gotta bust toe, man. Make a cut or whatever, put the cut back together, stuff like that. Up there, man, they just going with the whole thing, man. Catch a line and rock and roll to the next one. But they don't have as many locks as we do. Like, man, when I was with Genesis, we had a run up to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think that, if I remember right, the Arkansas River had 18 locks on it, and it's not a super long river. I mean, it's not like Mississippi or Ohio, but man, 18 locks. It seemed like you get out of one lock and maybe go 5 miles and you come up on another one. I mean, it's crazy up there, man. And I got lucky. I got to go up there and do it in the wintertime. And believe it or not, folks, Tulsa, Oklahoma can get pretty miserably cold up there. I remember many 5-degree days in that port of Catoosa.
That does not sound fun.
No. And the farthest I've ever been up the Mississippi River, I went twice as a deckhand, and I can barely remember it. I worked for a company called Coastal Towing out of Houston, and they shoved tank barges, and we went to Savage, Minnesota twice, which is up the Minnesota River. You get off the Mississippi through St. Paul and get on the Minnesota River, which is a pretty small river, and would go up there and I forgot. I can't be honest with you. I couldn't even tell you the name of the oil dock up there at all, man. It's been so long ago. I mean, that was like 1980 when we went up there last time. But if I was a deckhand to start all over again, I would honestly, it sounds funny, as long as I didn't have to be on call watch, I'd want to be a deckhand on the upper, run up St. Paul, man. Seriously, that is some beautiful scenery up through there, man. I've really taken a liking to that up there, and I've started honestly Over the last 6 or 7 years, I really started getting familiar with that river. Because, like I said, I'd only, as a deckhand, when I rode boats, I'd only been on it twice. And you know how it is when you're on the deck, man. It's like I don't know, man. Sometimes you miss locks and you miss scenery. I mean, because you're sleeping. You know, I was lucky. I didn't work call outs. The boat I was on, we had two tankermen, two deckhands, so I stood 6 hour watch with tankermen. So you know, there'd be times I'd be sleeping and we'd go through like say, oh man, LeClaire or Davenport, and I'd miss it because I'd be in bed. Unless you wanted to stay up, which you really didn't want to do that because you kind of valued your sleep a little bit. You know,
Well, Captain Henry, I appreciate your time today. How many more miles you have before you get to Richmond?
well, from right where I'm at right now, it's about 800 miles.
Is that 2 days running?
A day and a half. Now, before these electronic logbooks came out, it was a day's running. I mean, it was nothing to do 800,000 miles a day, man, on paper. But now yeah, I can average my truck can run 76 mile an hour. It's governed at that. So in a good 11 days, I mean 11 hours, I'm sorry. If I stay on the interstate, I don't get on back roads or nothing. I stay on straight on interstate. I could get anywhere from 730 to 750 in an 11-hour period, which isn't going to happen going that way, unfortunately, because like in the morning, I still got Indianapolis and it's going to be traffic time. I go through there. And then, you got some slow downs and stuff like that. Get over there. I got to go over to Dayton and then drop down 75. And then I drop down 75, a couple exits to 35, and I'll take 35 down into Charleston, West Virginia. And then I'll pick up 64 and run it over to 77. And I'll run 77 down towards Richmond. But, it's those little transitions and, through the spots down through there, you got little towns like that. 35 is not an interstate. It's, got some slowdowns on it. So it's not going to be, if I make 650 miles in 11 hours, I'll be doing good.
And did you say the next stop after that is home?
Yes, it'll be going home from there. And that's a long ways to the house from Richmond, let me tell you. Lord have mercy.
So it is a drive back home. It's not these company trucks. They don't fly you home, kind of like towboats.
No, no, no. You take the truck home, go do your home time, which is way different from towboats. I mean, don't get me wrong, man. I mean, these some of these guys on towboats make me laugh. They're like, man, I've been out, they go home for 14, 15 days, whatever. They're like, man, I got to go back to work, man. I've been off 15 days, man. It's like, man, I stay out sometimes 2 months and I'm lucky if I go home 5 days, man. I mean, put yourself in my shoes one time and see how you feel about that 15 days off, man. You feel like you're on vacation then. I'm serious, man. It don't work like that in this business. They can't afford to let these trucks sit around too long. These wheels, the only time that they're earning is when they're turning, brother. It's a whole different ball game when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, keep rolling, Cap. Drive safe. I'll see you on Facebook. All right.
All right, sir. I appreciate you, man. Enjoyed it.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.